Welcome, everybody. Oh, the feedback. My goodness. We are so happy to have you here today for a homecoming celebrating the Lenape spirit. I'm going to just hear my echo this whole time, aren't I? Okay.
Maybe we all will.
Yeah. So the James A. Michener Art Museum is on Lenape-Hoking, the ancestral and spiritual homeland of Lenape. Their unbroken relationship to this land has survived forced removal and diaspora. As the Center for Creative Expression in the Delaware Valley, we recognize their work as caretakers and creators as integral to the region. We commit to learning from Lenape culture and providing a space for their current perspectives in our work. I want to take a minute to thank our generous sponsors of the exhibition. Never Broken is one in a series of American art exhibitions created through a multi-year, multi-institutional partnership formed by the Philadelphia Museum of Art as part of the Art Bridges cohort program. This exhibition was additionally supported by a generous grant from the Henry Luce Foundation. And thank you also to Eisman Construction Incorporated and the Michener's corporate business partners. So now I'm going to introduce to you the artists whose work is featured in the exhibition, which you'll get to see after the program has concluded, and who are wonderfully here with us to celebrate these past few days and will be presenting on part of the panel. So I will start with the Chipap Tunhe. So his work confronts issues of identity, authenticity, individuality, and self-acceptance. He graduated in 2019 from the Pratt Institute, and he began working in the arts while continuing his passion for painting and sculpture. He combines concepts of form, space, and movement with elements of oral tradition, creating what he calls native modern. Joe Baker is an artist, educator, curator, and culture bearer who has been working in the field of native arts for the past 30 years. He is an enrolled member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians of Oklahoma, adjunct professor at Columbia University School of Social Work, and co-founder and executive director of the Lenape Center in Manhattan. Joe's work is included in the permanent collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and numerous other museums and collections in the US and Canada. Multimedia artist Holly Wilson creates figures as her storytellers, conveying stories of the sacred and the precious, capturing moments in our day, vulnerabilities, and strengths. Her work is included in private, corporate, public, and museum collections nationally and internationally. Wilson recently completed residencies at the Momentary, at Crystal Bridges Museum of Art, and at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. She's a member of Delaware Nation and Cherokee Nation and based in Mustang, Oklahoma. And then finally, Nathan Young is an artist working in an expanded practice that incorporates sound, video, documentary, animation, installation, social engaged art, and experimental music. He is a founding and former member of the artist collective Post Commodity and is currently a PhD candidate in the University of Oklahoma's Native American Art History doctoral program, where scholarship is focused on indigenous sonic agency. Nathan currently has a site-specific sound-based installation on view at Pennsbury Manor, William Penn's estate, which I hope if you haven't seen already, you can make time to check out. And Nathan is an enrolled member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians and is also a direct descendant of the Pawnee Nation and Kiowa Tribe. He formerly served as an elected member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians Tribal Council. And so now I am going to turn it over to the exhibition co-curator and moderator, Joe Baker, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Yes, I know, there's an echo. I don't know if there's any way to fix that. Tom?
Maybe if I was going to say, maybe if we just see how loud we are.
Yeah, because we're live streaming, I know. Oh, that's much better. Is that
Yeah, I think I noticed it was between you two. I think you two.
We are not compatible. So that's the reverberation.
Yeah, I believe so.
Are we better now? No?
Because the echo's distracting. Your sound guy should know that, right? Or is that part of the bit?
Okay, that's better, right? Okay, good. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. It's still bad. The laptop?
I don't think so.
I don't think it's the
Oh,
laptop.
you know
was
what
doing
it is?
earlier.
The cell phone?
Doubt it.
Huh?
I don't think so.
It's not devices.
Well, we're going to deal with the technical difficulties as best as we can, given the circumstances, but welcome. And thank you for being with us today. Wow, weird. Anyway, I ask and invite everyone to think of this in terms of a conversation, and we're going to be discussing celebrating Lenape Spirit's A Homecoming. So as co-curator of the exhibition, when I was thinking in terms of organizing with Laura the exhibit, I was thinking about assembling the rightful heirs to this ancestral land and what that contemporary voice might be, what that voice might bring to the exhibition. And that's what I think you will see within the exhibition hall. It's with immense pride that I am seated before you in this array of distinguished fellow tribal members who will be participating in the conversation. I'd like to open this up with the first question of today, which is, what are some of the challenges of the diasporic community as you understand it? What are the challenges that you face as a tribal member living away from ancestral territory?
I can begin by speaking. Is there a pretty bad echo?
Yeah.
I'm trying to modulate my voice.
Yeah, I honestly think we need to take off the mics and just talk loud because I'm having a hard time understanding what you're saying. I don't mean to be rude. Yeah. Because I can hear you and then I hear it there.
Yeah. Well,
Trying to live stream.
I'll say I'll say I'll do my best here. As somebody who's been working in the region and also went to school in the region, the distance is the problem. This is the most difficult thing for me to navigate. It's especially the last couple of years, or four years. But primarily, distance and time are it's very difficult to find your way here. All right, now we're going again.
Yeah.
So I've been working here regionally in the area, and also I received my art education in the area in upstate New York. And the difficulty for me was just purely is what people would probably think is obvious, is distance and time. It was always a challenge to get up here. You lose hours of working trying to get from far away where we are in Oklahoma, 2 days away here. That's just a real simple logistical observation that I still deal with today. I will deal with that because I'm an artist and I feel it's important to express a Lenape point of view if I have the opportunity to do so, like today. But for me, it's as simple as that. Also, there's a strange malaise. There's a strange feeling of being knowing and hearing and kind of I traveled here as a tourist as a child, but always feeling a connection that it was really hard to express or to articulate. There was a feeling it's hard to explain when you feel that like that looks really like a really like just really simple word, like a comfortable place to be. Like that feels natural to me, and so I've always had this kind of fascination with the Northeast and Lenape-Hoking, just because it felt it felt like home to me as a young person even.
So do other artists here on the panel have a similar reaction, or do you sometimes feel that your return to the ancestral land, the homeland, is from the viewpoint of a tourist and not as a resident or not as a true member of the community?
Can I speak on it?
Well, I think those two fit together as a concept in some ways. I've never traveled here until like somewhere in the 2000s, and it was New York City, and there was no community to meet until I came the year that you had the Lenape-Hoking panel. So this idea of being a part of a community when there isn't a community that you know there, but that also extends into Oklahoma because of the way they moved us and then the way they set up allotments. They broke apart families on top of the movement from the homeland. So it's multiple ways of feeling displaced from a place that should be a place you know very well. Like when you're a kid and you go back and you visit your old neighborhood and everything looks smaller, but you remember the weird places you ran. I don't feel that way in the cities, but in the country driving here, I felt this connection to the trees in a way like when I used to live in the North Carolina. We lived in Cherokee and then in Lawton. We always lived right by a forest. So that and the way the light falls through, that is a connection I have to the land. And it's not anything of a thing you could hold. It's more something like you hear your heartbeat and you feel that. That I think is more how I feel connected. And of course, it makes me all emotional and verklempt thinking about it. And when you're in the city, like New York, or I haven't been to Philly or any of the big cities around here other than New York, the noise is so loud, it makes it hard to hear that. So I don't know if that answered that question properly, but.
Can I speak on it, Joe?
Mhm.
So for me, I moved to upstate New York when I was about 14, 15 years old. And living in upstate New York, it was interesting as a Delaware tribe, Indian. What was confusing was you would see names, Lenape names, and places of Lenape, but it didn't feel connected to me. So I was walking in places that directly relate to my ancestors, but then when I would have engagements or conversations with others, it was like those were the people who used to be here. Those are the people from before and no longer are. And so there was this really complicated conversation in my head. Do I have the right to be Lenape? Do I have the right to be a Delaware Indian anymore? Is there such a thing? It was just this very entangled conversation. And as I grew older, I realized that the necessity to bring back a face and a conversation into that place. But definitely to answer your question, I feel like a tourist. And when you ask about where's your homeland or where's home, I don't know what that means, honestly. I have lived in many parts of Northeast PA, New Jersey, New York, and they're all beautiful. And they're all Lenape-Hoking, but at the same time, I haven't found that place yet that this is home. But I think what's happening here now, a sense of that is starting to get us shaky, as Holly has said.
Yeah. It's like a door's being opened that was never opened, that you're allowed to come back through. and try and find where you fit. Because every time I travel, I'm always like, do I belong here? I get that because I go from California up to here and down and around. And I'm always like, do I belong here? Is this a place that I would call home? Because, you know, my people, I'm Delaware Nation, we've gone all the way to Mexico and back up. And so it's like this weird thing of trying to find where you fit in all these locations. And at the end of it, the place I feel like I fit the most is with my family. You know, my kids, hard part of home, but the soft part of home is where you lay your head and bring all your garbage and set up your studio and walk around and pick things up. And each time I travel to a place, and especially up here, it feels more like it's clearer than it was before.
So it would seem to me that what each of us in our own way are describing here is a true definition of internally displaced people, which is part of the language of the United Nations. I know for myself, growing up in Oklahoma, my first visit to New York was in 1978 after I completed graduate school, and I was appearing in an off-Broadway play in the Cabiculo Theater during the worst snowstorm ever to hit Manhattan, which closed all transportation. And I thought, I'm home. And I think for each of us, and I know Nathan's family, we've had some great exchanges by that, but I think for each of us, there was an individual or a group of individuals who really inspired in us the curiosity to know about this place that we come from. Mm-hmm. And for me, that person was Nora Thompson Dean, mm-hmm. who would do return visits to the homeland in the 1970s at the invitation of anthropologists and scholars and university personnel to talk about Lenape culture. And she would come back to our community and tell us stories of what she experienced and what she saw in the ancestral land. So as a kid growing up there, I understood Oklahoma as home, a home, a place, but I also knew there was this other place, this place of origin, this place where we had effectively been all but erased. And that inspired in me the passion and the drive to return. So in 2019, along with Adrian Kumans, Curtis Zuniga, and Brent Michael Davids, we founded Lenape Center to push back against the erasure of our presence in the homeland. And this exhibit, I would offer, is a courageous attempt, more than an attempt, a courageous success at reestablishing our rightful place in the homeland.
So I really relate to Holly, what you said, and again, it's this feeling of that, again, as I said, comfort, but also I do feel that, and in some ways, we're contemplating what it means to be, as you said, Michael, but also too is, am I a stakeholder here? Am I a stakeholder here any longer? When I know that my ancestors were, for sure, but there are other issues as well, and I'll speak to this as somebody, one of two people that have served in the Delaware tribal government. Curtis Zuniga, I'd like to acknowledge, former chief of the Delaware Tribe of Indians, the front row here. Is that we honestly don't know where a lot of Delawares are. Our situation is very complicated in Oklahoma. We need an internal census. We really don't know how many people live. I mean, some people may, it's the census, I'm sure, knows and other things, but our tribe internally does not know how really to serve people. We are so spread out. We need a census of our own internal Delaware nations to understand. We are so spread out across the United States and the world. That's a real need for us at this point right now.
So thinking about ancestral land and institutions that occupy these territories, and given the fact that land acknowledgements have become very popular among those institutions, what do you think, how best to serve our communities through this land acknowledgement phenomenon that is beyond performative, that is more action-based? What can we as Lenape people hope to ask our institutions to do?
Well, I think, Joe, working in a large institution before and hearing, we give homage to the people who are here before, and they go through this kind of conversation. And then immediately following that, it's into this, okay, here's the business of the day, and that's it. And so land acknowledgement is something that I think is necessary. However, in my feeling, what I would like to see more is leaderships coming to places where the Lenape are, to our leadership, and having a deeper understanding between who these people really are. It's not just a conversation about we're on that land. What is that land about? What was the culture that was removed? What was unique about those individuals who lived there? And I don't know if that can happen unless these large institutions are engaged with leaderships, or with the Lenape Center, for instance, where these kind of programs like Michener is doing here is bringing that, finding that information and bringing it to the public and reintroducing what it means to be Lenape, our culture and traditions, our language, and how that affects the local community here. As I said before, our language is all over this area, but there's that disconnect. And I think we need to have this large organizations bringing that back into understanding that our history and technology is intertwined. Our information is intertwined. And I think leadership plays a significant role in that conversation.
Oh, I have a lot to say about it. I agree with you 100%. It's nice to hear the words, but I feel they're hollow. It's like we've checked the box on most institutions. And my question, whether it be Lenape or another tribe in another place, what are you doing with the community? One thing I just heard from a person in Chicago, they're just starting a brand new place, Center for Native Futures, and I loved what she said. They're opening next week, and the first hour or two is just for community. Any natives that are living in that area are invited first to the space so that it's a place that we can all connect with each other and the work. And it's something as simple as that, and honoring the Native and Indigenous communities that are there, that are represented. But then from there, I think tapping into what was lost in these different communities and having workshops and classes where you bring in Native speakers and you bring in people who can also teach both an older technique and a newer technique, or have a class that's about, because you're on land that was taken, and what are you doing to give that back, that story? What are you doing to try and help bridge the loss that so many people have? Like even young people today, I've talked to some and they're like, how can I say I'm Native? I don't look Native. People tell me I'm not Native because I don't look enough like it. Or you don't go to powwow, or you don't go to ceremony. So you can't be that. So by an institution opening up and having more stories about how this history happened, and how it affects their institution, and being able to bring people in could help build a bridge for people who are feeling that loss and that disconnect that most people have. I mean, you probably know who your grandfather is or your grandmother is and how they came. My husband has a book that shows, yep, they came over on the Mayflower. And I can't get past a certain group of my people to know whether they made it down from Pennsylvania or here or New York. I only get so far. And then the records are very hard to find. And the language was taken, and you couldn't speak your words. I know very little. Like, my name that was given to me is Upturned Flower That Travels, and I feel I have definitely honored that because I travel all the time. But I can't say it because nobody could teach me.
I'd say we all feel very strongly about this. I'd say many Indigenous people feel very strongly about this around the world. My first experience was hearing land acknowledgements was in Australia and New Zealand. And in New Zealand, it's there. You teach the story of the Maori is taught. I think that land acknowledgements are complicated, but we have to start somewhere. And first and foremost, it's a good start in that way. I'll give land acknowledgements that. I do feel the same, and I do agree with that. I believe everybody on the panel that it can oftentimes seem as a hollow statement if there is no meaningful action behind it. And what does meaningful action mean or look like? And in often case, I think it's just a matter of something as simple as education. Local school boards deciding to adopt some sort of curriculum that acknowledges that there was a tribe, and that at least gives a basic understanding. That humanizes the experience. Also brings all tribes, not just the Lenape, back into the American story, to the American, the myth of America, the story of America. We are very much a part of that story that has been obscured, erased, has been used a lot to describe it. But I think that's a start. How do we take these meaningful steps? Let's just get real simple. Let's start teaching these ideas. Everybody has their own local politics. Everybody has their own story and their history. But it's a good start, I think. If I had my way, that's what I'd do.
And, I think being here in this room is a fine example of a land acknowledgement that has resulted in an action. And that action is the exhibition that you can see in these galleries, because it really began here as a land acknowledgement and an expanded conversation about, with staff, with the administration, about what we can do to make this actionable. And through that conversation, you see the results in the room. There's another example. Seated in this audience, Rachel Talbert, Teachers College, Columbia University, regarding land acknowledgement. We find this all the time. Oftentimes, it's one individual who takes the charge. That's a lady right there who said, what do you need? What can we do? We said, we need a curriculum. So Teachers College, Columbia University has developed a Lenape curriculum for the public schools of New York. It's a first. It's never been done before. It's an amazing sort of ongoing conversation that keeps expanding. And I think when I think about it, all of this is a chaotic and complicated history, but it's also simple. It begins with a conversation. And our society today is a transactional society. We are so accustomed to putting in that debit card, pulling out the cash. And a kinship and a relationship has to begin at a different level. And that level is the human level. That level is the simple level, and it begins with conversation. But I want to jump to another thing, because one of the most exciting things for me has been to be involved in a conversation of Native art over the years that really challenges stereotypes of what is Native art. And I think we have seated in this panel 3 artists who are examples of that, whose arts practice is sort of outside the range of what most people think of as Native art. And so, as Native artists, what are the challenges associated with working in these rooms that are outside the market, outside the collector's base, working in experimental, unexpected ways, bronze, sound, crazy stuff with trowels, on canvas? How do you deal with it?
Well, I was fortunate enough to, I went to the University of Oklahoma, and my mentor was a lady who was from the Seminole Nation in Oklahoma, named Mary Jo Watson. She was the first doctorate in Native American art history. Before that, anthropology was the purview over Native American art. So this was a paradigm shift that I was lucky enough to be a part of and to have as a mentor of mine. But I really, while I had Mary Jo was a teacher of mine, and I'd seen this great accomplishment, and I knew how profound what she had done was. It was a big deal, and just happened. I just happened to be there. But there were other Native art teachers also at the University of Oklahoma at that time. But what was really important for me, while they weren't teaching Unami Lenape or Muncie Lenape at the University of Oklahoma, I was from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, where the capital of the Cherokees are. They teach Cherokee, the Muskogee language, the Kiowa language, and the Choctaw language at the University of Oklahoma. The way that they teach languages and the way learning other languages gave me the ability to read contemporary art, to understand contemporary art. It gave me the ability to understand that things can be communicated in different ways of seeing and different ways of thinking about things. My mother is from the Pawnee Nation, originally from Nebraska. And she told me a story about when the car came along, they didn't know what to call it. So they called it a thing with big eyes that farts when it goes down the road. Pardon the vulgarity, but that was I don't know if that's true, but that's what I was told as a youngster. I saw a parallel, strangely, between that and contemporary art. This new language of art, the ways of seeing things, symbology, symbols, semiotics, and those ideas, they came to me through studying Native languages, to starting to understand a different way of thinking and communicating. And that way I was able to, because I think that's one thing that people feel about contemporary art, is it's very dense, very difficult to understand, very elitist. But I think it's a matter of learning to read and learning to understand and think in different ways. And language does that.
So what you're really touching is the idea of abstraction, the abstract. And that, to me, is the basis, sort of the baseline of Native art. It is an abstract practice. It exists in this other place. And with that, is all the potential of new creation.
Yeah, I think to get back to your question, Joe, and since you bring up abstraction, I went for industrial design, so everything needed to have a function. Form deserves a function. And so thinking about abstraction, that really kind of broke against that. But then when we look at native traditional things, they have form, function, and aesthetics. And so a lot of that was in my mind while I was in college going through education. And so some of the issues that I would come into would be you're a native artist, and then you don't want to be casted as a native artist because that means that you practice a specific thing, or there's a certain perspective over native art. It's going to look a certain way. And so for a long time, I would say I'm an artist. But my work is highly discussing our historical context or culture and tradition. As a native person, my work is native art. And so almost to a point now, I want to be called a native artist because it is so difficult to break that image of what native art is. So in creating abstraction, the pure form of abstraction, what's so beautiful for me is it forces the viewer and the artist to have a direct conversation. And so my work often discusses, I think of it as a visual oral story, traditional stories, whereas if I was an oral storyteller, I would be speaking to an audience in a current voice, talking about past things. And I think that abstraction allows me to do that. Abstract art allows me to have a current voice and a current time where we can have a discussion. And it's required of me to bring out a story, but also to connect that story to the viewer. And so abstraction has been just the most beautiful thing for me to lean on. But of course, when there's no feathers or icons that are easily, normal perspectives, it makes things very complicated when speaking in the art industry. Are you a native artist? Are you practicing craft? Are you an artist? That's also part of that complicated thing. And so, yeah, I push back with this, going back to abstraction. It is a beautiful conversation where it allows native artists like myself to dive into historical conversations in a contemporary voice.
I can tag on to that. When I went to art school originally, I didn't talk about being native because I did not want exactly what you're talking about. And then my professor found out, like it was a secret from him, which I did keep because he was not a very nice guy, but that's okay. And when he discovered, two things happened. One is his wife was trying to be very nice, but she looked up history on Delaware Lenape and brought me photocopies about who my people were, which is incredibly insulting because it's as if I didn't know who I came from. And then he proceeded to ask me why I wasn't making pottery. And until, which wasn't even our pottery, it was Hopi looking pottery, Navajo, Southwest. Oh, it was very insulting. I love your face. Just like, yeah, I still don't know if I can find my chin from that. And it wasn't until I went with Laura Allen, who is here, and she took me to the Trenton Art Museum that I actually got to see Delaware pottery and hold it. And it was the most moving moment. And I won't cry again. Someone needs to make stupid faces at me so that I don't get all verklempt. But all of my work has always been about story. So my mom was a huge storyteller. My dad taught at the Fort Sill Indian School, and my mom grew up there, and we lived there for a time, but we were there until 1980s when they closed it. But they would have dinner, and we would play under the table, and everybody would come, all the faculty from different tribes that taught there, and they would tell stories. So it was always this thing to see who could tell the scariest story, so that then when everyone had to go home, you had to go home in the dark and like get to your car, your home, without like the little people or the stick people coming for you. So I grew up hearing stories all the time. And so my work is my way of storytelling. And I feel my story has a very specific message that I put into it because it's about what I see, what I feel, what I see my kids go through, but it's also layered in with my history. But then you might see it and you might see something that connects to your family, and you might see something and it connects to your family. And so I feel like I don't have to always be completely specific and if about a thing, because I think it's almost like underground rivers. You know, you can't really stop them. The water is always moving. And so my work is the story that is under the ground, and you come up and you are able to connect with it by laying your story on top. And in a way, it's a way of, for me, connecting us at a root level that we overlook all the time. We're all people. We've all experienced things. We've all had different things that happen, and you need to be able to honor. So I use all kinds of materials. So I used to be called a sculptor, and it's like, but I started my art making photography, and then I went to sculpture, and then I went to grad school and fell in love with jewelry, and I started casting bronze, and then I started painting, and then drawing and printmaking. And for me, it's like material is message. So all of my work has message based on the material that I choose to put in. So if I use silver, it's because it's precious and it's a precious metal. And the thing I'm telling you about is precious because it's in sterling silver. And so it's all these things that have message and meaning that you can parse out, or you can just enjoy it for the beauty of what it is. But I do have a hard time, I'm hoping it's shifting, because I don't fit in. And as the actors say, there's no leather, feather, or beads, or that's the only jobs they got. I listened to this really good talk about some Native artists, actors, because when they're having these touring large exhibitions, a lot of the curators are still looking for what they or their audience conceives as indigenous or native. And if you don't fall into that sweet spot, then you are out. And so I've had a lot of that experience. And I had a conversation with a curator, and they were asking me, and they showed me their new museum. This is a while ago, so it's nobody in this room. They said, "We're so excited, what did you think?" And I'm like, well, it's a little disappointing in this, that here is the historic or the older works, and the contemporary artists are in the hallway out here, and yet you have a museum space down below that you have all the other contemporary artists, but nobody from this space is down there. So you've divided us yet again. And even at the Met, I hate to say it, I always tell people, I'm like, yay, we're in the Met, but we're off the kitchen, you know? And I mean, that's a joke in a way, but in some ways it's not, because if that exhibition front door is shut, you kind of walk past and you don't see us. And so it's this idea of, and for me, a lot of my work moving forward has a lot to do with being seen. We're here, we never left, we got moved around a lot, but we're still present, but we're seen, but we're unseen as a people, as a history. And so I think a big part of these institutions need to figure out how they can have all the different voices. There's how many tribes? So there's gonna be a lot of voice. So I told that curator, I was like, and on top of that, I would like to be both here and there. And the problem is, you're told that I'm too contemporary. So the contemporary curator needs to deal with me. And then the contemporary curator goes, oh my gosh, you're native, I can't touch you. The native curator needs to deal with you. So you fall into these weird like cracks in the concrete. And I go, I want to be able to tell my daughter, who is 16 and was younger then, that she can go make art. And she can be in these spaces and they will see her. But right now at this time, she wouldn't have been seen because she would fall into both of those categories. And it was a great way to say, hot potato, not mine, you get to deal with this. And I still think there are institutions and spaces that still have not addressed that deal, I think. Mm-hmm.
We have time for one more thought, and then we're going to open this up to questions from the audience, the last 10 minutes of our time together. So let me ask each of you, what is the takeaway? What would you like for the public to take away from this experience and from this exhibition?
Okay. So for me, my work, you'll see it. It's large work. It's in the back. It's directly reflective of the pottery and the weaving. And what I was looking at was the details of the pottery and the weaving. Because in those details, it really begins to open a story. Many nations and many cultures of people have pottery and weaving, but it's those little details that we tend to overlook. And so there is this very simplistic conversation that I'm reflecting on these details and highlighting these details and increasing the size of them. These are the works. But there's also this conversation about, these are the paintings, this conversation about why and how and what was used and where were these things being produced. And in this pottery and in this weaving, there is a limited amounts of mark making or this attention to detail. And I was really curious to why specific those lines. What was the meaning of that? I won't know what that was. Unfortunately, that information is lost to us. But instead, I understand that there was a Lenape here in the Northeast creating this work, sitting there, maybe by the Delaware River Gap, maybe by, Pittsburgh, these different areas, doing this kind of work. And so while I was in there, I'm in this moment thinking about a specific time, a specific place, and now it's relating back to me. I'm reliving those moments in a similar way, thinking about their process. So what I want people to take away from this exhibit is looking at the details, because there are many nations of Native Americans. Unfortunately, what happens is there's Native Americans becomes this large group, and we begin to become marginalized as just Native Americans, and you begin to lose the beautiful details of each of our cultures and our traditions and who we are as a people. So focusing on the details has that deeper meaning to me. And I wanted to share that to you because living here, you're embracing this environment that my ancestors embraced and that I embraced. And I think place affects us all, regardless of your nationality or your background. We're all affected by this place. And those details determine where we go and who we become from that. And so that's what this work is really about.
Takeaway.
I obviously have my stories. I want people to be able to see history and then be able to see what is now, because only in seeing history and what's happening now can we also change our futures. And I think that's a big thing, is being seen is an important part, because if you're not seen, then you don't exist anymore and you're just a history. And I'm pretty sure that we're not history because we're here, and that's like my favorite part of this exhibition, is it isn't just things that were dug up or buried or sitting in a dusty museum. And so I want people to hear story, to be able to see how they connect to story, and to realize that we're all still here.
Yeah, very, very much like I agree with Holly. That's really a hope of mine, is this idea of empathy and understanding, that it may relate to your own family story, and that this does matter to people in the region. It does matter to them. It is important. It will help inform it will help enrich you as a person, a greater sense of empathy and understanding, and that will lead to these kind of the healing of these kind of unfortunate parts of history. But ultimately, I think it's really that to empathize and understand that yes, this does relate to you.
Well said. So, questions? Yes, sir.
Between being members of a community against broken apart and their attempt to build and back forward one another. And on the other hand, that deep connection you obviously have with your community and your knowledge of the deep history and so on. But I'm wondering is how that does that inform your life? we constantly try to bring that out and communicate that to the viewer in the right way. The second dimension is something we all share together, and I'm going to assume that probably a lot of people share with me, the feeling of being profoundly alienated in this society today. It's not a comparison to your specific alienation, but living in a society that's violent, that is not just, that is discriminatory, that is war-like, and so on, and having a desire for a more communal, more shared, and just society. So anybody, regardless of their background, is going to have that dimension feeling alienated. So what I'm wondering is, you have sort of a double burden of your own particular background, and then living in a larger society, which these problems are so rampant. I'm wondering, does that inform what you do? Is there any way that you see how you handle that, speak to that, or you just leave that to decide to deal with your own specific concerns? You're going to be overwhelming.
I will address that only because I do stories. I feel that both parts, and when I make work, it is about something I saw. Like, I don't just sit there and go, ooh, what's the most powerful thing I can do? I make work because I saw something while I was walking, or I saw the way my kids were interacting with friends. And for me, that becomes the catalyst for the work. And it's really important. And when you talk about this idea of violence, I worry the most about my children growing up in this world. And it devastates me because I'm like, what is going on? But I make work that addresses what affects me personally and them. It used to be like, before I had kids, it was always like this view. But when I had children, I realized this view had to be this far, because I am constantly concerned about how things move for them. I don't know how they are, but for me, I can't parse them aside. And then there is still, I make work that is about the beauty of nature as well and how you move in it. So it really depends on what it is that has sparked my creative that day. So I don't know.
So for me, and thank you for your very thoughtful question. I think it's important to realize that the foundation of this country was built on violent acts of genocide and displacement. And those acts began with the arrival of the Dutch in 1609. They continued with British occupation and included the US government. And I want to share with you a personal story about my uncle, Wilbur Wright. The purpose of this story, which is a difficult story, is that it illustrates that that violence that occurred here on this land followed us, my community, the main body of Lenape, Delaware tribe, all the way to Oklahoma. So I'm reading from an article in the Bartlesville Examiner Enterprise newspaper from 1934. The body of a young man was found at 6 a.m. this morning, mangled beyond recognition, in the Santa Fe tracts a mile north of Dewey. He was identified as Wilbur Wright, 18 years of age, of Dewey. Identification has been made by comparing fingerprints taken by John Creeds Jr. with the sheriff's office records. Wright's prints had been taken when he was jailed in connection to the Wadey Wittenberg forgery case. He was later acquitted of the charges of forgery. Parts of the body were scattered for 28 yards, and the arms and the legs were severed from the body and badly mangled. This is a clear indication of the violence that was inflicted and experienced and perpetuated on our community members as allotment status natives regarding oil in Oklahoma. The violence that we experience and understand today has continued. It didn't end. It didn't end with a certain period of time. It certainly didn't end with a treaty, a handshake. It continues today. And until we, as a human, as humans, deal with our history and come to terms with the violence of the foundation of this country, I don't think we can truly heal and move forward. Yes.
Land from what freedom, like that's how you feel. But you're in a state now that does not recognize you as an indigenous people. Like Pennsylvania, you have the right here as indigenous people. Because I just signed a petition seeking you giving your rights with a state senator, because Pennsylvania, and this museum has done that, and when now talk about this is native land and understand that we go here, the state really doesn't recognize you as native people and have any rights to the territory.
Well, we're a federally recognized
Yeah.
tribe.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Pennsylvania, right?
well, I think that I'm not sure of the process of which you speak. But I think a lot of this has to do with really our own personal philosophies about, are we a stakeholder if we're not here in the state paying taxes, if we're not, living here, working, as part of the community. I think what's happening is that there have been some recent, well, first and foremost, I think we have an environmental crisis that has brought attention to American Indian lifeways again, and created a lot of interest. Second of all, I think that it was amplified to a point that with Standing Rock that is a national conversation at this point. Whether or not the state of Philadelphia recognizes the Delaware Tribe of Indians, to me, in an abstract sense, is of very little importance. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean that in a leading way is that I would like to have that to be important. I would like to see us. What does that look like? Let's have that conversation, that dialogue. How can we make a win-win situation out of something like these that came from tragedy? Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I can't speak to a lot of these issues.
You're speaking for Lenape Nation? And we're saying, as members of federally recognized tribes, sovereign nations, recognized in a relationship with the federal government, we really can't speak to the situation that you're describing.
That really was based on my question. You're here and trying to treat you horribly for hundreds of years. Like, how does that feel when you're here and this state in particular still does not recognize you? But I understand you not being able to address it.
Well, I think Nathan makes a beautiful point, is that let's be in conversation and let's see how the state of Pennsylvania can benefit from a real relationship with the federally recognized tribes.
And Delaware Nation has, in Allentown, we have a preservation office on land that they own there. So there is, you know, like I know they are, and that's my tribe out of Anadarko area, that they're trying to make those connections and have stuff that they have for people in the area to go to. And that's in Allentown, and it's our preservation office. We have one in Anadarko, and then we have one in Allentown, which I've not visited, but is on my list to go see while I'm here. So,
Other questions? Very quiet. Okay, thank you very much for your attention and attendance, and enjoy the exhibition.
Thank you all so much for this conversation, and we're going to have the exhibition